Me back again. Never buy a property with tenants in situ. So if you ever go onto Zoopla, Rightmove or Prime Location, when you're looking through and scrolling down the page looking at properties and that, you may come across a property here and there, tenants in situ. That means that there's people living there. Never allow the vendor or the estate agent to convince you to, oh yeah, those tenants that are in situ, they're cool. Leave them in there. Oh yeah, they're good tenants and that. Yeah, don't bother finding no new tenants. Just take over the property. If you're buying it for investment purposes, obviously, just take over the property and just leave those tenants in there. They're cool. Never do that, because it can come with some dirty, nasty, rascal surprises, as I found out. So I made a video. I ain't released it yet. I'm going to release this video before I release that video. But I made a video saying that basically I only rent rooms to people. I don't like to rent a whole entire property. I will never rent a whole entire flat or a house to people, because the psychology behind people renting rooms is this. When you go to rent a room, even if you have no specific date or plan to get out of that property, eventually, you know, when you move into that property, when you move into that room, this is going to be temporary accommodation. Now, it might last 2-3 years, but this is temporary accommodation. You're in the mindset of, this is not going to be my fixed abode. So one day I'm going to leave. As opposed to, if you rent out an entire flat or rent out an entire house to someone, that is going to be their permanent fixed abode. Man are going to start building up families. Man are going to start sending their kid to the local school. Man and gal are going to start finding local jobs in the local area and that, becoming friends with people, and that becomes their fixed abode. And it's going to be a lot more difficult to get out of someone from a property who they believe that's their fixed abode, as opposed to this is a room, this is temporary accommodation. If people stop paying rent and that, it's easier. Or if you want to evict someone, it's easier to get them out of a HMO, house of multiple occupancy, as opposed to a house or a flat that they consider to be their fixed abode and that. Because they've gone into it. They entered the property thinking this is temporary accommodation, as opposed to the people them occupying a flat or a house as a family. This is my permanent home. Trust me, man, meet these tenants on this job, blood. And he said the reason why I'm in a council house right now is because that cunt of a landlord decided to put the rent up. So I couldn't afford it. So you know what they did? They didn't still make the payments of £800 a month for the rent, and then it went up to 900, and they said, well, they can't afford the 900, I'm going to still give you 800. You know what they did? I'm not paying rent at all. This is why I never rent out the whole entire property to people. And if I did, I would need to have some contract in place where it's guaranteed rent, yeah, from some sort of estate agent, or I would plan to give my property to the local borough for them to run it. There's no way, blood. I'm not having no one take over my property and not pay rent and that. So that's why I always rent rooms and that. Because when you rent rooms to people, they never get that comfortable. How can you get that comfortable in a place where there's always a stranger coming in? Your flatmate can always bring around a friend or a girlfriend or a boyfriend and that. When you're in the shower and shit, I left my towel on that. Yeah, this is not your fixed abode. This is just not your private place where you could just quickly run out and run naked down the hallway and dart into your bedroom and that. There may be strangers about and that. So when people rent rooms and that, they're in the mindset of, I'm not going to get that comfortable. As opposed to when people rent a flat or a house and it's their private fixed abode and that, they're more than comfortable. I'll give you an example. Imagine you get kicked out, blood, and you go to your grandma's yard, but you don't have a room, you're sleeping on a sofa. At some point, you're going to think to yourself, blood, this is just inconvenient. It's 6, 7, 8 o'clock. I want to still rest. People are coming downstairs because they want to watch TV and that. As opposed to, if you're living at your grandma's house, you get kicked out from your mum's yard, you're at your grandma's yard, and you've got your own room. What? You can bring over a friend, you can bring over a gal and that. You've got your own private space to bun your weed and play your video games and that. But you're going to be there for a year. As opposed to, if you're on someone's sofa, you're thinking, nah, how can I make things better with whoever's yard I was living at, gal or fucking mum and that. So I never rent out the whole entire flat to people or the whole entire house to people, because I don't want people to get comfortable in that, because that's when people start taking a piss. Imagine that. Imagine the tenant saying that, I'm not paying the rent. I'm not paying the increase in rent, so I'm just going to stop paying rent. Full stop. So anyway, like I said, never buy a property where there's tenants in situ, because the vendor or the estate agent and that, they will try to convince you to leave the tenants in. Find your own Ras Clark tenants. So anyway, So this property that I bought recently, the one where I made that video where I just completed on my third property, I got an interest rate agreed of like, I think 0.25 or something in it in June. Then shortly after, the interest rate started to go sky high. So my payments on my property, it was agreed that I have to pay £257 a month, yeah, interest only. And that was at that rate of like 0.25, for example, yeah. So mortgage offers usually last about 6 months, yeah. So obviously the mortgage offer lasted 6 months. So from June to December, the mortgage offer lasted and that. But obviously in that time, the new base rate started going up. They were going up to 2.5, 3% and that. So obviously I'm cool. My rate has been fixed and that. But the vendor was being a little puss, yo. Yeah, he was taking his time. Like the conveyancing solicitors on his side want a joke thing, blood. My conveyancing solicitor, I've used her before and yeah, she's good. She's quite responsive in that. There was a period of time I didn't hear from her for like 3-4 weeks or a month and that, and I had to get onto her and that. But for the most part, this time and last time, she was quite responsive and that. The solicitor on the other side, we will send them documents straight away. They'll take 2 weeks to respond. Oh, that's not the right document, for example, and that. So anyway, this thing just dragged on. Come to find out, the mortgage offer expired on the 31st of December and that. But obviously, Christmas time, everyone packs up on the 20th of December. These times, it's like the 1st of December and shit still ain't complete. So a man starting to, you get me, get vexed now, innit? You're thinking that, blood, if my mortgage offer doesn't complete, if I don't exchange contracts by the 20th of December, because obviously that's the cut-off point really, not the 31st, because everyone packs up for Christmas on the 20th of December. If I don't complete, if my mortgage offer expires and I ask my mortgage broker to ask for an extension so that it goes into February and that to keep the same rate, if my mortgage offer expires, then I would have to go on to a new rate. Well, what does that mean? My new rate is not going to be 0.25. My new rate is going to be 4%, blood. So that means that my mortgage payments are going to go from 257 to like, I don't know, like 450. That extra £200 could make this property seem just not like a good investment, not profitable at that time until I get a new and better rate. But that might be in 3-4 years' time when the base rate goes down to a decent rate. So anyway, the vendor's been on some joke thing and that. He's just sending me some bullshit voicemails and that. Every time I speak to him, when he sends me a voice note on WhatsApp and that, because I actually met this tenant on a job. So I tested one of the properties in Northampton. And then, I don't know, about a year later, I went to go and buy it. Yeah, I didn't even know. Yeah, it's just randomly, I tested the property. Then he bought it and then he put it on the market and I come to buy it. So I had the vendor's number in it. And every time you send me a voice note on WhatsApp, he will come back, oh, Jelani, just having some problems with my property. Like he has a separate house and the builder said that the work was going to cost £5,000 and now it come to £20,000. What are you telling me this for? Every time this guy sends me this voice note, yeah, telling me about his problems and that, my heart starts beating, you know, because I think he's just going to use some excuse to not sign the contract and that. There's a lot more into the story that I can't get into in it, yeah. But the guy was on a joke thing, just on some joke thing, blood. So anyway, when it came time to exchange contracts and that, and for him to hand over the keys and that, it was like 2 days before the Christmas break. Yeah, so we're talking like the 18th of December and that. He was saying like, oh yeah, saying this on a voice note and that, on WhatsApp saying, obviously there's tenants there and that, and I did say to them they need to go by mid-January and that. So I was just hoping that you could allow them to stay until mid-January. I said, nah, get them out or whatever, innit? I had to tell him this twice because he tried it again, innit? You're like, I don't know, 2-3 days later or whatever, innit? I told him, get the tenants out and that. The second time, he said to me, oh yeah, you know, maybe we can just meet up at the property and we can exchange keys and then you can meet the tenants and that. I said, blood, you need to get them out. Yeah, tell them they need to leave by midday or whatever, innit? So anyway, but to be fair, I was kind of going along with it to some degree because I need this guy to sign the contract. If he doesn't sign the contract within the next 2 days, then I lose the mortgage offer and I have to apply again. And then it's going to be at some mad rate. So I didn't want to push him too much because I needed to sign the rate. Worst case scenario, he signs the contract and that and leaves the tenants in. I will go and physically remove those fucking tenants out myself. Yeah? I don't play about. So anyway, I kind of was going along with it. Like, look, just tell them to leave the property and that or whatever, innit? But I was like, yeah, I'll meet you at the property and get the keys off you. No problem, innit? So anyway, he did get them out, so I didn't have to go down there and evict them myself, innit? Because I would have went mad up in the place, innit? Yeah, maybe catch a charge. I don't know. I don't give a fuck, blood. No one is telling me in my property you're not getting out, blood. We're gonna have a serious problem. Especially you ain't signed none of my contracts and that. Nah, fam. I'm physically removing you, blood. You man are gonna have to smack me up. Yeah, that's what it is. So anyway, he got them out. Cool, done. I've got the keys to the property and that. Boom, refurbishing it, whatever, innit? Yeah. So months has passed now, and 2 weeks ago, I went on a job, yeah? This is Northampton doing this contracting, innit? Yeah, testing. I went to one woman's yard, just some random white woman. Let's say the property that I bought is called Smith Street. I went to some random white woman's yard, I'm chatting to her, and I'm like, what are the neighbours like around here, innit? And she was like, oh, they're kind of alright. That person over there is a bit of a nightmare, a nuisance and that, but for the most part, they're cool in this area, innit? Boom. So she said, oh, why do you ask, innit? And I was like, oh, I've got a couple properties in Northampton, so I want to know the good areas to buy and the not so good areas to buy. And she's like, well, where's your property? And I said, oh, I got one on Smith Street. She was like, oh, you bought number 12, didn't you? I said, what? I was like, how do you know that? And she was like, oh, my daughter, no, hold on a minute, my daughter bought number 12. You bought number 14, didn't you? I was like, yeah. She was like, yeah, my daughter owns the property opposite you. So let's say, for example, I own number 14. Oh, my daughter owns number 12 and that. I'm like, rah, imagine that small world, you know. So the girl that owns the property opposite my property, I went to her mum's yard to do the electrical test. And it just so happens, you get me, that. So anyway, I said to her, oh yeah, I see your daughter a couple times. Never really spoke to her and that. But I was asking her about like, what are the people like in the local area, innit? Because obviously, if I buy a property and the neighbours are crazy and that, and they play loud music at 2 in the morning, you're affecting my money. Now I'm gonna have a problem with you, innit? Yeah, so I was just asking her, innit, like what the neighbours like and that, innit? So boom. So I said to her daughter, so I said to the mum, oh, I noticed your daughter has a Ring doorbell at the front. And I was like, usually women have that, like when they have bad neighbours or they have some crazy ex. Because remember, I go in tenants' houses every day and I see the patterns. Yeah, I see when people got cameras and that, it's usually because they got trouble with their neighbours, innit? If people live in an area where there's no trouble, no stabbings, no shootings, no burglaries, nothing like that, yeah, there's always rainbows in the sky and that, no one's having no doorbells and shit like that, no Ring doorbells and CCTV camera, innit? Yeah. But when people have nuisance neighbour and trouble with their neighbours and that, they're usually gonna have Ring doorbells and all them things there, innit? So I said to her, ah, yeah, I noticed your daughter had a Ring doorbell and that. Did she have trouble with any of the neighbours in the area, innit? And I was like, obviously the woman downstairs below my flat told me that there was 6 guys coming in and out of the flat that I owned. Obviously when it was under the previous vendor's occupation, innit? He was managing the property. So I was like, maybe she got the Ring doorbell because she felt a little bit intimidated and that. And she was like, well, obviously, if there's a bunch of guys coming in and out of the flat, obviously the woman's going to want to get the Ring doorbell and that. But she was like, forget about that. Those 6 guys that was in that property, they never paid the vendor his rent for 6 months. I was like, you fucking see? You see what I fucking... So imagine the vendor that was telling me, oh, why don't you leave the tenants in situ, innit? Yeah, like they, I told them that the new vendor might want to get you out by mid-January and that, so you have to leave by mid-January and that. But they was planning on staying there for the foreseeable future, innit? Blood, the guy wanted me to take on tenants that had not paid the rent for 6 months, blood. I feel like slapping my man right now, you know. Imagine him trying to convince me, yeah, keep the tenants in, they're cool, innit? But they ain't paid their rent for 6 months. Now, maybe it weren't 6 months. Maybe it was 4.5 months. Same fucking thing. This is why I find my own tenants myself. I have to pattern them up. I have to slightly, I'm not going to say intimidate them. But you understand what I'm trying to say. Lay down the fucking law. I told you, anytime I get people come through my door to come and view a room, 1 month's rent plus 1 month's deposit. If you fail to pay the rent, I'll serve you a notice. You have to leave. I'm not afraid to tell anybody that. I've had it before. Plenty of people. When I say that to them, they give me this look like, or they laugh and they smirk and that, and they don't end up taking a room. Cool. I don't care. I'd rather scare them away. I'd rather filter them out and have an empty room than have some dickhead renting a room off me, not paying rent. Bro. I'll go mad. That's why whenever I see on Zoopla, Tenants In-Situ and that, if I was ever going to buy the property, you have to get those fucking tenants out, blood. That's it, blood. I'm not taking on no new tenants because they were there before me. So naturally, they're going to feel like they're going to have some sort of authority. Naturally, especially if it's a whole entire house, not a HMO, not a house of multiple occupancy and that. If it's a whole entire house, imagine you live in a yard where you're paying rent, yeah, for 5 years, and some new landlord comes to take over the property. You're gonna feel like you have more authority over this property than him. You know more about the property than him. You was there 5 years before him or her. You're going to feel like, nah, you can't really tell me nothing and that. Now, obviously, that might be some weak energy landlord. Man's a big energy landlord. I'm not a big guy, but man's big energy in that. But my tenants, I've never had no one not pay rent, blood. They're shook at me. I'm not rude to them or disrespectful and that. But when I talk, they fucking listen. I've never had no one not pay rent. Yeah, one person was a day late. But I've never had no one not pay rent. I don't play about. It's not about being 6'10" or fucking 50 kg, 500 kilograms. No, blood. It's the way you carry yourself, blood. So this landlord thing is for certain people and certain people only. If you're scared of confrontation and that, blood, you're going to be a shit landlord, blood. That's it, blood. So I never take on no one else's tenants and that. Because if they were there before me, they're going to feel like it's all a mind game. It's all a mind game. Like I said, with the renting the room thing as opposed to renting the property, it's all a mindset. It's all a mind. It's a psychological thing. You put someone in a rented accommodation where there's other people, HMO and that, they're never going to feel comfortable to want to stay there forever, because who the fuck wants to be living in a HMO till they're 60 years old? And name me one rich millionaire that lives in a HMO and that. It don't fucking happen. Yeah? Everyone wants their own private fixed abode. Yeah. So when you put people in a rented room accommodation and that, they're naturally going to think, okay, at some point I'm going to be leaving this place. Yeah. Now, they might plan for 6 months, it might turn into 3 years, but it's still in their mindset of moving and that. Whereas suppose you stick them in a fixed abode, private accommodation, that even if it's a studio flat, that motherfucker there, if he has no real plans of expanding his horizon and that, blood, he's going to be there for a very long time. Trust me, I meet these council tenants that have been in a studio flat for 17 years, 25 years, you know. So, yeah, man, I've had it before. Before, when I bought my first property, so obviously this is my first property, sorry. So this is my first property. When I bought my second property, which is a buy-to-let, obviously, another flat, I was looking around in the area and there was one flat that was getting refurbished. The guy was just laying down some flooring and that. And basically, they already signed some contracts for some new tenants to come in. And I was like, nah, I'm not taking on this property, because some new tenants are supposed to be coming from London and that. So now they're basing their whole life around living in Northampton and that. And I'm not going to be the one to tell them, nah, you're not coming, you need to go and find another property. Because they probably found a new job up here and shit. So I thought, nah, I'm not taking them on. I'm not taking on no one else's tenants, blood. I need to vet them. I need to pattern them up my rascal self, blood. Because estate agents, they don't come with that energy like man, blood. Yeah? All of this signing contract shit, but you don't need to sign no contract, blood. Me, I get the tenants to sign contracts for their peace of mind. Because when they come, man talk a certain way, they might think this is dodgy and that. I've had people ask me, do you own the property and that? So they might not even believe that man's the... Because you know there's a lot of these dickheads going around taking over people's... Is it service accommodation, taking over people's properties and acting like it's there. No, man don't do that bullshit. Man don't take over no one else's ting, blood. Man own my own things, fam. So, yeah, I'm not taking on no one else's properties or nothing like that, man. I'm finding my own rascal tenants, blood. But yeah, man, that's it for today, man. Don't take on no one else's tenants, man, because you never know, they could be hiding something from you, like the tenants them not paying rent for 6 months and that. But that's it for today, man. Stay wise. Done.